Okay, I want to keep this a bit more visceral, but uh, why exactly do the planets spin? It's never really made clear why they actually spin. The astronomers just say, well, something hit it, or when it was born, something just ran into it and it made it spin. Well, that doesn't explain anything. Even if giant asteroids were to hit the Earth, it wouldn't make the Earth spin all that much. It's just too big. You would need something of comparable mass and velocity to make anything spin. So essentially what they're saying is the planets are constantly hitting each other, making each other spin, but that's clearly ridiculous. What actually I think happens here is that, well, I'll read some of this out to you. I like to keep this more visceral so that people know that this is actually happening. As stars evolve, their total axial angular momentum diminishes. This is because their moment of inertia factor changes, their masses change, their rates at which they lose or gain mass changes, their total angular velocities change, as well as their total diameter changes, which directly impacts both their densities and moment of inertia. What this means is that only young stars can have lots of comparable angular momentum about their center lines, and it means we can give another pillar to astrophysics with the determination of stellar ages. In other words, this is a gyrochronology. This pillar directly involves the star's angular momentum, which is a subset of gyrochronology as a whole. It not only includes both the angular tangential velocity and its rotational velocity, but the role mass loss has during stellar evolution. I'll explain this out in a little bit. Let me read this out first. Mass can be lost at greater amounts per unit mass during specific stages as well, so they are variable mass systems, similar to rocket exhaust. But the mass loss is dependent on many more variables and vectors. This is essentially rocket science, but as applied to stellar evolution, which is, planet formation. So it is abundantly clear the sun is a young star because it has a very large angular momentum. It is easy to reason. Think of a top that spins on the ground. Do you think that most angular momentum is in the top after 10 seconds or just after you spin it? The same goes with stars. They slow down. Jupiter and Saturn are middle-aged stars because their axial angular momentum is much lower. Uranus and Neptune are even older because their axial angular momentum is even lower. The Earth is even older because of its axial angular momentum being even lower. Comparing Mars to Mercury or Venus will be possible as well. Mars's angular momentum should be higher than Venus, regardless if it is less massive. This is truly extraordinary. And I did calculations on these objects. This, of course, is complete blackout from any type of mainstream media source or anything like that. But this is essential knowledge for understanding why these objects are spinning. Remember, establishment doesn't understand what they're looking at. They don't realize that the planets are actually older stars. But what I have here, just to explain this out just a little bit to you guys, is the I is the moment of inertia. The L is total angular momentum. In this case, it's the axial angular momentum. And then you have the W, which I guess you'd call it omega or whatever. And that's the angular velocity. That's the actual velocity at the surface. So, the velocity at the surface of the Earth at the equator, I believe, is around 1,100 miles an hour. With the sun, it's a lot higher. With Jupiter, it's, I can't remember how fast Jupiter actually, its angular velocity. I have that calculation done in here somewhere. But I plug in all the numbers. I plug in the moment of inertia. I plug in the angular velocity, and then I come out with a total axial angular momentum, which is the L. And I have those values right here. As you can see, Earth is higher than Mars, which is higher than Venus. And this is actually expected because Mars is much, much younger than Venus, and Earth is older than Mars. And what you'll notice is that Earth and Venus are about the same mass, but Earth has 166 times the total axial angular momentum as Venus. How is Venus spinning so much slower than the Earth when it has the same mass, and it should have come from the same disk as claimed by the dogmatists that work at universities? This discrepancy is not explainable by the nebula hypothesis, but it is explainable inside of stellar metamorphosis. What actually happens, ladies and gentlemen, is that when young stars are hot, big, and bright and they're born, they spin tremendously. They spin with an enormous amount of axial angular momentum. Think of a basketball spinning on your finger so fast that it would burn your finger, but then it eventually slows down. And imagine that basketball also shrinking and slowing down, shrinking and slowing down. And eventually, as it ages, of course, up here is the axial angular momentum diminishing, and down here is the ages. So the ages, they get older. So as the star spins down, it gets older and older and older, and it goes on down on a smooth continuum. And this is a roundabout place where we should expect most stars' axial angular momentum to be. So it narrows the younger it is, and it thickens the older it gets. So you could have a much higher difference in total axial angular momentum. And to give labels for these objects that I have plotted here, I had done the calculations for these objects. The Sun is right here, T-Garden star, TRAPPIST-1, Luton star, Proxima Centauri, Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune and Uranus are very close in age and close in the axial angular momentum. And Earth, give another couple billion years, give a few tens of billions of years, hundreds of billions of years, and then eventually you have trillions of years, which Mercury is by far the oldest main object that is considered as a planet in our system. This thing is really, 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 really old, as well as Venus, but Mercury just puts Venus to shame, which puts Mars to shame. Unfortunately, inside of the dogma, nothing can be older than 13.7 billion years. And if you look at this graph here, 13.7 billion years, the cutoff would be about right there. So nothing can be below that, according to the Big Bang dogmatists. I should say creationists, because it's a creation belief. But anyways, to them, Mars, Venus, Mercury, these objects can't be their extreme ages. But we know they're extremely old because their axial angular momentum is really, really, really old, really, really low. And of course, I plot them here, and I have here axial angular momentum loss due to mass loss at different rates. And then I have on this area right here, axial angular momentum loss due to tidal interactions and impacts. So basically, what causes these rocky objects to slow down is tidal interactions from gravitational pull from larger objects and impacts. So as you'll see here, impacts don't make things speed up. Impacts make things slow down. If the Earth were to be impacted by something, that impact wouldn't cause the Earth to spin up, because the chances of something hitting the Earth at just the right angle, at just the right time, with just enough mass to make it spin is just ridiculous. If anything hitting the Earth would cause it to slow down. As well, think of like a basketball spinning on your finger again. The air resistance on that basketball would cause the basketball to slow down. But also, what you need to remember is that the basketball will also be losing mass. And that mass is lost due to those impacts as well as photoevaporation of the surface, and the fact that, well, sometimes these objects, they orbit around hotter hosts and they get ripped apart. So that's another mechanism, but I won't go too much into that. But as you'll see here, it's a smooth continuum. And the reason why I wanted to write this down, because this is just another way for people to understand what it is they're looking at. It's very unusual to see astronomers just look at the obvious facts and say, well, we don't really know how that happens. Or a big rock hit it. Or, I mean, if you go to Wikipedia, or if you go online and they say, well, we don't know why Uranus is tilted the way it is. We don't know why Venus doesn't spin as fast, even though Earth spins 166 times more axial angular momentum. Well, the reason why Venus doesn't spin is because it's extremely old. It's been wandering the galaxy for a long time. Think about a top. When you spin a top on with your finger, you can have the top two similar masses, But if you spin one and then you wait, maybe 30, 40 seconds, that one's going to completely stop spinning, and then you spin up another one. Well, obviously, the one that stopped spinning was the one that started spinning first. But the Venus had just as much axial angular momentum as all these other objects all down the line. But also, these objects are very, very, very young. And it's sort of unhelpful from the establishment standpoint to claim that the sun is 4.5 billion years old when the Earth is actually 4.5 billion years old. And then they try to force these objects over here to be the same age as something like the Earth through their proclamations, if you will, because the sun, they don't know what they're talking about. To say the sun is as old as the Earth when they have vastly different axial angular momentums is just bad science. It's not reasonable. And to say that Venus is the same age as Earth too is also unreasonable when Venus barely spins at all. You can literally walk on the equator of Venus. Of course you can't walk on its surface because, the CO2 atmosphere makes it really, really hot. It's like 900 degrees. But if it had the same atmosphere as the Earth and, the surface conditions as the Earth and it didn't have any oceans, you could walk on the equator of Venus and watch a perpetual sunrise or a perpetual sunset. That's how slow this Mamma Jamma spins. And to say this is the same age as this, it doesn't make any sense. This is clearly vastly older than Earth. And Earth is also like about 3.5 billion years older than Uranus and Neptune. And Uranus and Neptune are clearly older than Saturn and Jupiter. And Jupiter is clearly older than the stars that still shine. And Jupiter's, it's lost a large majority of its mass already, no longer shines. But yeah, I want people to understand that, we live in a very amazing place here. And to sort of look at these objects and say, well, it all formed in a single disk. Shut up, don't ask questions. I think that's a big injustice. And if anybody should tell you, this isn't how it happens, well, ask them, how do these things spin? Why do they spin? There's something in the very beginning of the star that causes it to spin really, really rapidly with a lot of mass. So the birthing process of a star includes something that makes it spin. That's essential. And spin with a hell of a lot of inertia. And eventually that spin diminishes as the object ages. But yeah, these calculations exist. I have here Mars is 4.9 times the total axial angular momentum as Venus, and it has less mass, which is weird because you would expect something with more mass to be spinning with more axial angular momentum, but because Venus doesn't spin very fast, Mars spins faster and is younger. It has more axial angular momentum, so Mars is definitely younger than Venus. So yeah, but I think I have this in paper number 438. I'll have to find that and I'll link it to the bottom. And I'm also doing this video because there's a lot of like misdirection and like people online that are just not addressing these actual issues, these things that are actually really cool to understand. It don't require like you to take all rationality and throw it out the window to understand. Like when they constantly push the black hole stuff and the Big Bang stuff, it's like nobody understands that stuff because it's nonsense. This actually explains the why these objects spin. They're just older stars. It's very simple to understand. All right, take it easy, y'all.